If you're old enough to remember when phones had cords and the only thing that went viral was a cold, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Big 6-0 with Kaylee Harris and Guy Rawlison. Because who better to discuss life's second act than two people who still think mature is a type of cheese?
Hello and welcome to the Big 6-0. I'm Guy Rawlison, and today we're turning back the clock to revisit those lazy childhood Saturday mornings spent in front of the TV, eyes glued to our favourite cartoons. And sitting alongside me in the pilot seat is Kaylee Harris. Hey Kaylee, how you going?
The pilot seat? Wow, thanks.
How's your week been?
Yeah, been pretty busy this week. It's been good. I've had a good week though, but yeah, it's been busy. What about you?
Look, I've been batching it this week, and I spent a night binge watching way too much stuff, including cartoons we grew up with. Can you believe that?
I've been so excited for this episode because it's just a Pandora's box of gifts, isn't it? It's just there's so many things that come to mind when you go back and think about cartoons, and they were a huge part of our childhood.
Oh, can you believe we were taken with a talking squirrel and his dim-witted moose buddy, or a superhero bat with wings like a shield of steel, and he teamed up with a very politically incorrect Asian sidekick in a pink Volkswagen?
Yes. Again, your memory is incredible. But going back to I guess we started watching cartoons in the 60s because we were born in the 60s, and they were very basic back then, weren't they? It was with black and white TV.
Oh, look, yeah.
And I can remember back as far as, I guess my earliest recollections are things like Prince Planet and Gigantor. And Gigantor had that theme song, Gigantor, Gigantor,
Yes.
you know, and there'd be some sort of a robot thing. And do you remember those?
Oh, look, I've got a story. When I was 4, and we were living in Sydney, and Prince Planet was my favourite.
Yeah.
Absolute favourite. And my mum used to take the top off a jam tin, like a jar, and put a big P on the front of it, and then put wool around the little, the jam tin, the jar, put it around my neck, and I'd...
So you had a P?
Yeah, I did. I had the big Prince Planet P, because that used to fill up with his energy or fuel or whatever it was.
That's right. Yeah, it used to fill up.
That's
yeah.
it. And my best friend, when you have a best friend when you're 4, because your best friend changes every week,
Yeah.
was a kid down the road 3 doors down called Matthew, and he used to be Gigantor. So we'd pretend going up and down the street playing it.
Oh,
yeah,
my
100%.
gosh. Isn't that amazing? And what was the one? Was it Marine Boy? Do you remember Marine Boy and the mermaid Neptina?
Oh,
I just wanted to be...
yes, and Splasher.
Yeah, and Splasher. Yeah.
Yeah.
And all those superheroes, they were like little animals, or they were little people like us. Yeah.
Yeah, he used to eat the oxygum or something, so he could breathe
That's
underwater.
right. Yes. Oh,
You know.
gosh. Now you reminded me. Oh, my goodness.
There was a bit of a sameness about all of those characters, though, weren't there? Whether it was Marine Boy or Astro Boy, they all had the same very great big eyes, and there was a lot of that robotic sort of thing, as with the Gigantors and all those sort of things. And they all, because it was all that is it manga, the Japanese sort of animation sort of thing, because they were right into it, weren't they?
Were they Japanese cartoons or not?
Yeah, I think they were. Those Astro Boys and Prince Planets, they were all Japanese cartoons, or the animators were Japanese. And yeah, so it was a whole period there in that early to mid 60s where it was, and very accentuated big eyes, that whole thing. But it just...
Yeah, I remember after with Gigantor, I remember my sister and I making a robot out of cardboard boxes and sticking them all together, and then drawing eyes on it, and little antenna things on its head. We used sticks, for its antennas. And I remember, and it was actually pretty good, the robot. Yeah, it was. That was our Gigantor. When you think about the way that we played as kids in the pre-digital world, it was amazing, wasn't it? It was though we kind of based our play around a lot of those shows that we watched, didn't we?
Oh, yeah. Look, and whether it was being Gigantor and flying around and pretending you were a robot, but all the noises that came with it as well. You had to do the noise to become Gigantor and, hit your fists together because that's what Gigantor did. And yeah,
Yes.
and like old mate down the road, Matthew and myself, we'd spend hours just pretending that's who we were. And it was just another life, and it was so long ago, but it was only yesterday for in our minds.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head though. Pretending something that that we did a lot in the positive sense when we were kids, but these days, if pretending is discouraged, like it's almost like pretending to be somebody else. But that's what we did, and that's how we played.
Yeah, and it's how we interacted. There was a commonality among kids as well because we all knew those cartoons, and it didn't have to be your Gigantors. It could have been all those Hanna-Barbera cartoons like the Jetsons, or and people talk
Yes.
about how the Simpsons these days could foretell the future. How good were the Jetsons with their teleconferencing and all those sort of things?
And the robot maid,
Oh yes, yes.
whatever her name was, I can't remember what her name was. Yeah, but we
Yes.
all sort of couldn't imagine a time when we were at that age where you'd be so lucky to have a maid.
Well, well, I'll give you a little bit of trivia.
Yeah.
The maid, whose name was Rosie, that
that's
was the name of the Rosebot
Yeah.
in the Jetsons.
Yeah.
The lady, and this is a useless piece of trivia that you just pick up along the way. The lady who voiced the maid of Rosie also did the voice for Wilma Flintstone.
Oh, did she? She was in
Yes.
the Hanna-Barbera group of voiceover people.
Yeah, so Rosie the maid was also Wilma Flintstone as far as that voice family goes. So,
Yeah.
that's one of those.
Yeah.
It's like Jim Backus from Gilligan's Island, who was the voice of Mr. Magoo.
Yes.
Everyone had another role to play within that whole sort of Hollywood animation and TV sort of set.
Yeah, and the whole the Mel Blanc studios were everyone. You didn't just do one voice. You did like Mel Blanc. You did a dozen different voices for different cartoons.
Well, that's it. And he, of course, he was Barney Rubble, but he also did
Yes.
Bugs Bunny and Yosemite Sam and Daffy Duck. And so
Yeah.
you're 100% right. There's all these voices that we associate with the characters, but there were real people behind them, and usually multiple sort of voices from characters as well, which I find it hard to get my head around sometimes because I think, oh gosh, some little intonation in your voice.
You hit the nail on the head when you said they were only just short cartoons. There was a few different. There'd be the Bugs Bunny one, and then there'd be different characters in follow cartoons after them. It'd be a whole half an hour, but it'd only be 6 4-minute cartoons.
Yeah, I think they all worked out our attention span was pretty short, and color movement and all that sort of thing. So keep a cartoon to 3 or 4 minutes, and then direct our focus somewhere else to another character and another storyline.
Yeah,
which was clever back in the day. I mean, we think we're pretty clever about the way we do things now, but yeah, the precedent had been set years and years beforehand, and usually through cartoons, and because of, like I say, the colour and the movement, and even your Wile E. Coyotes chasing roadrunners and all those sort of things, and anvils falling on this poor old coyote. And these days you couldn't get away with it because there'd be a violence disclaimer at the cartoon before you even start. Do not try this at home. And I'm thinking, I don't know how many kids are going to try and ride a rocket or order something through the Acme sort of,
Acme company. But also, when you think
That's it.
Daffy Duck and Elmer Fudd. Well, no, was it Elmer? No, it wasn't Elmer that was trying to. I'm going hunting wabbit.
Was that Elmer Fudd?
I'm hunting wabbits.
Yeah, and I think he would. When you think about it now, he'd shoot at Daffy Duck, and Daffy's beak would fly around his head 10 times, and then Daffy would move it back into front position again because his beak had been shot off. Think about that now. That's terrifying for kids. You'd never get away with it.
I know. And you'd also be another disclaimer about, the fact that Elmer may have had a speech impediment or something.
Yes,
By the time the disclaimers were finished, then the kids would probably never be able to watch the cartoon these days. But you talk about, like, those little snippets of cartoons that would change through a half-hour program, but there'd be like 5 or 6 cartoons. There was a series of cartoons called Fractured Fairy Tales.
Yes.
And it would have Leonardo Lyon and Mr. Peabody and Sherman and
Yeah.
the
Oh, yeah.
Wayback Machine, which was a great way to teach kids a bit of history in a really light-hearted way, if you remember that cartoon at all.
Yeah, I do. I loved Leonardo Lyon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Mr. Sherman, he was always so straight, wasn't he? He was a dog, and he was so
That's it.
Mr. Peabody and Sherman.
Yeah.
That's right. It was just, oh my gosh! Now you're bringing back memories, and I loved Rocky and Bullwinkle.
A thunder of jets in an open sky, a streak of gray, and a cheerful. A loop, a whirl, and a vertical climb, and once again you'll know it's time for the adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and friends.
And Boris and Natasha from Rocky and Bullwinkle. Do you remember, like, when you think about it, how do you say, it's like really, it's not racist about people from Eastern Europe?
That's right. Yeah, no, you're right. And then you had people like Dudley Do-Right of the Canadian Mounties making out that Dudley's a bit of a doofus, and it was the Canadians poking fun at themselves. But you're right, whether it was Boris or Natasha or whoever. Yeah, there was a lot of that, wasn't there? But it was always sort of just under the surface. But we're all too young. We just knew they were bad guys, and we'd cheer for the good guys, and we sort of boo the bad guys when you're allowed to actually boo someone and not get in trouble for it.
Exactly. Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
But so much politically incorrect. Like I mentioned, Batfink and karate. And that was a stereotypical karate, and the whole thing. But then there was Hong Kong Phooey. And Charlie Chan and the Chan Clan. Like, what's with that?
When you think, it was amazing, wasn't it? We didn't come out as bad racist people, because of those cartoons. You just accepted that it was. We knew it was a cartoon.
Yeah, that's right. And you're right. We hope that we didn't come out bad people, and we understood the concept, even though we were only quite young. So I think there's so many of those instances, and a lot of cultural cringe as well. There used to be a series of American cartoons called. There was Super Chicken, there was Tom Slick, and there was one called George of the Jungle, which only ran for like a season apparently. But then 30 years later, Brendan Fraser, on the back of that little cartoon series, made a movie called George of the Jungle.
George of the Jungle, strong as he can be. Watch out for that tree.
That's it. And of course, then there was a cartoon called Roger Ramjet. I don't know if you remember that one.
Roger Ramjet and his eagles fighting for our freedom. Fly through wind and outer space, not to join them, but to beat them. Roger
Yes.
Ramjet,
That's almost got over. Roger Ramjet. It sounds like a porn star, doesn't it? It's I think it does. Great name for a porn star.
Oh my gosh! But that was a very chest thumping, Roger Ramjet and the American Eagles fighting for our freedom. And you think, wow, like was this all developed on the back of the Cold War, and because that was the whole thing. They were flying around in jets, they're fighting for American freedom, and we didn't get it back in the day, but I'm sure there was some undertones there with things like that.
Oh, it would have been based on something like that, I guess. But do you remember cartoons like Top Cat?
Top Cat, the most effectual Top Cat.
And Magilla Gorilla.
We've got a gorilla for sale, Magilla Gorilla for sale. Won't you buy him, take him home and try him? Gorilla for sale.
Magilla Gorilla, the premise was he was in the shop front of the pet store, Melbourne Peebles pet store, and he was always wreaking havoc, and no one would buy him. And he was, Mr. Peeble hated him, but he was, and you think about that, a gorilla in a pet store. I know you can get everything in America, but wow.
Yeah, you have the bull in a china shop, but the gorilla in a pet store, that's sort of next level, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
How many animals were there in those cartoons? Like, was there an animal that wasn't included on a cartoon?
I don't think so. I think they were all based on animals, like Yogi Bear.
A Yogi Bear.
Most of the cartoons were based on animals rather than people.
Yeah. mean, you had Boo Boo, you had
Yeah.
Underdog. I don't know if remember Underdog with Miss Polly.
No, I don't
He
remember
was a dog
Underdog.
with big floppy ears. He used to go around saving the world. But you're right. Whether it was Top Cat or Huckleberry Hound or Deputy Dog,
There were so many. I mean, if
oh
you
yeah,
imagine,
I
it
know.
would have been huge business for the TV companies to pump these out. They imagine the animation and the animation experts having to pump out these cartoons every week. It would have been a pretty big deal.
Yeah. Well, and they didn't have the technology that we have today, and they talk about Disney franchises and things like that, and how everything would be hand drawn, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But when you think about the number of cartoons that came out back in the day, and the work and the teams of artists and graphics sort of people that must have gone into that, let alone the voiceover people, and then all the producing. It was a monumental sort of effort, wasn't it?
It would have been very big business for them
Oh, look,
as well. There was so many because there were cartoons. Like you remember, we'd get up at 5:30 in the morning. The cartoons would start at 6 or whatever. And if you were lucky enough, if your parents let you watch cartoons before school, because a lot of parents didn't, and then it was on again in the afternoon from about 4 o'clock, and a lot of kids weren't allowed to watch them until they'd done their homework. So you'd race home from school and do your homework so you could start watching the cartoons at 4 o'clock, because there was no such thing as replaying them.
no, well, that's it.
Once they were on, they were on. You know.
Yeah, look, I wasn't allowed to watch TV in the morning. I was on a Saturday before, heading off to sport or whatever it was. But on the weekday, I wasn't. But you'd sort of sneak in something. I'm sure Mum and Dad knew. You'd sort of sneak in at 6 o'clock and turn something on, and you'd watch something called Space Angel, which was I hated, but it was it was animation, but it was a real person's mouth on the animation.
That was awful.
yeah.
That was
Yeah,
creepy.
I
That
know.
was very creepy. Yeah.
It was super creepy. But in the afternoons, after you'd done your homework, and Mum would probably say, "Look, you can watch a little bit of television, then go outside and play." You'd be able to watch
Yeah.
something like Wacky Races. I don't know.
Oh, Wacky Races. That's right.
Yeah.
This episode of the Big 60 brought to you by Louis Carr Real Estate, helping people in the Hills District find their dream home since 1992. Ready to buy, sell, or rent? Check out louiscarr.com.au for all your property needs.
You have a think. We're talking about inappropriate cartoons. What about Pepe Le Pew and the female skunk? Like, if that's stalking, right? That is serious stalking and stuff of that poor female skunk, whatever her name was.
I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about
what
that.
message is that sending? Like,
It says, "Don't ever trust a French skunk."
that's right. If one you have to come across one in the street.
That's right. And of course, the female sort of, the unwanted amorous sort of relationship was actually a cat, if you remember, because some paint fell on the back of this cat, and the skunk thought it was a damn female skunk.
That's right. That's right. Oh my goodness. There's just so many. I can't get over how many.
I had not thought about that.
Yeah.
And then there were things like there was a show called Milton the Monster, which was
Milton
just
the
to take
Mon-
off
yeah,
the whole
yeah.
of the monsters and the Frankenstein thing, and this is going to be another podcast where we talk about the Addams Family, that whole creepy sort of genre that went on for a few years as well.
Yep.
But so much. But Pepe Le Pew, wow, I hadn't even thought about that whole stalking thing. And that's another disclaimer altogether for kids.
Oh, I
isn't it?
know. And what about, Popeye and olive oil? Popeye was the real nerd, and he had to eat his spinach. Now, think about the message in that. Eat your greens and you'll grow these massive muscles. So there was a message in that, even in Popeye and olive oil.
And Popeye was developed off a real live sailor. Of all things, I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember his name, but that whole character was all centered around a guy who actually did exist. I don't know whether olive oil actually existed, but it was a bit of fun. But you're right; it sent a message as well. But you're talking about the whole creepy sort of thing. Then there was things like Scooby-Doo and the mystery machine, and they used to go and hunt down the zombies and the vampires and all that sort of thing.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We need some help from you now. Come on, Scooby-Doo.
But with Scooby-Doo, they had, remember the characters in Scooby-Doo? There'd be, there was the good-looking guy and there was the good-looking girl, Daphne, was it?
Yes.
And there was the girl who was sort of portrayed as the nerd. But she seemed to
Yep.
be the one that always solved, the mystery or the crime or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I don't. Was there a message in there about, you don't have to be the gorgeous cheerleader. You can be the nerdy kid and still have success in life.
But was that the message that, but it was always the message? Does it mean that, hey, nerdy kids, there's a life solving crime and chasing zombies for you? Because I don't think the pretty girl or the handsome guy ever solved. Did they ever solve any of those mysteries, or just the nerdy girl?
I think just the nerdy girl, and with the help of Scooby.
Of course, I mean,
and Shaggy, who didn't stop eating.
Oh yeah. Hey, and little bit of trivia as well, and I'm full of it. The guy that did the voice for Scooby Doo also did the voice for in the Flintstones, Bam Bam.
Oh, really?
And also did the voice for Muttley out of Wacky Races.
Oh,
so and if you want to go a little bit further than that, he actually did Boo Boo as well, and Ranger Smith. But you talk about those groups, like with Scooby-Doo. Then there was Josie and the Pussycats and the Archies.
Loved Josie and the Pussycats.
There you go.
They were, for girls, dreaming of being, in a rock band or something.
Yeah.
And,
I mean,
it was just such a metaphor for people that
Spice Girls have got nothing.
Yeah, that we knew. We all knew characters like the ones in these cartoons.
Yeah, and predating even the Archies.
Everything's Archie. Archie's here.
They actually had a couple of, Billboard top, 20 hits as well. I mean, it wasn't a real band. It was obviously a session group. But
Sugar.
Sugar, all those sort of things. But before then, even the Beatles got involved because they had their own cartoon series in the mid to late 60s, the Beatles.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right, they did. Yeah, you're right, they did.
So,
oh my gosh,
so many genres were covered, whether it was, all your animals like Tennessee Tuxedo or Huckleberry Hound. I don't know whether
Huckleberry Hound, I was going to say.
The biggest show in town is Huckleberry Hound. And you're remembering all those songs, that whether it was the Prince Planet theme song or Gigantor or Marine Boy, they all had songs, didn't they?
Yeah, we do. I mean, you do remember them. We used to sing along to them every time it would come on. You'd get excited. And what was this week's episode going to bring? What was the story?
Look,
and you didn't want to miss it.
Yeah, and there was just, and as we were saying, a lot of these things went on to, 20, 30, 40 years later, whether it was George of the Jungle or whoever, movies then became developed, and primarily on the back of probably people of our sort of demographic who have a fondness for those cartoons back in the day. So producers then made these movies for when we were so-called adults, and under the veil of, this is a kid's movie. No, it never was. They were always going to be attracting those 40 and 50-year-olds that would want to reminisce about that cartoon series and go and see the Brendan Fraser of this world, because we remember George of the Jungle. How good was that,
Yeah, and the Scooby-Doo movie, all those movies, and like you said, the TV shows of and recent movies of the Addams Family that have come out. They stand the test of time, and they were great for us because it took us back to something different, didn't it? But
that's right, and Lost in Space, all those sort of things that were just remakes, not designed for kids, designed for the kids in our hearts that still live, that will go and pay our hard-earned to go and watch these things at the cinema.
Yeah, well, don't wander into Lost in Space or the Addams Family, things like that, because that's a whole nother podcast. We've got to do TV shows. Thunderbirds. Be Still My Beating Heart, Virgil. We're gonna. I know you know about that as well. That's a whole nother episode. We're going to talk about TV shows like Maxwell Smart and Get Smart and stuff like that. Yeah.
Don't get us started. Hey, look, we've on the back of the podcast, we've got a Facebook page, so anyone can find us at the Big 60, and we put this out there to a few people. And I just want to go, and you tell me if you remember any of these sort of things. We've already touched on a few, but Craig actually came back to us and said, oh, look, apart from the mainstream like Gigantor and Marine Boy, he loved something called the Herculoids.
The Herculoids. I remember that name.
Yes. Like it was a program that had like a dragon called Zoc or something like that, and Gloop and Gleep, which were these ghosty sort of figures that could absorb energy. So there's all those sort of, I'd forgotten about it. Another lady, Katerina, said she loved Shazam, which was the genie.
Oh, Shazam. I love Shazam.
I know.
Thank you, Katerina. I remember. I used to love Shazam. Yeah, the idea of a genie, that you could have a genie, what it did for your imagination and things like that.
I know. And it's just so good to know that, we're not the only ones that are thinking, gosh, do we have an ill-gotten, ill-spent youth just watching? And there were just way too many that we probably haven't even skimmed the top yet of so many of those sort of, programs that sort of kept us sort of our imaginations turning, and like a ferret on a wheel. We just kept, it just stimulated who we were and how we grew up. And obviously people like you and I are still thinking about it and have that vivid recall, whether it's a gorilla in a pet shop.
I know. And we don't have square eyes for sitting too close to the TV.
Yeah, look, I haven't gone blind yet, but as I'm getting older, I'm thinking it's not because I sat too close to that tiny little TV set where you'd actually have to get up and change the channel using a knob.
That's right. And you had a choice of 3 channels, I think, 7, 9 and 2 or whatever.
That's it. Hey, listen, I think I've got to go and catch up with a few more cartoons that I haven't caught up with, go and binge watch a little bit more. But can we do this again?
Absolutely. This was so much fun.
And of course, if anyone wants to get in touch with us, they can drop us an email too, contact@thebig60.com. If they've got any, ideas or cartoons that, they may have loved back in the day that we haven't even mentioned, drop us a line.
Yeah, please send those ideas through, or TV shows that you'd like us to revisit, and that would be great. What do you remember about the great TV shows at the time? Because that'll be an upcoming podcast.
Hey, I can hear Mum calling. I better go. Can I come round to your place next time?
Okay. Sure, no worries.
Okay, I'll see you later.
See ya.
The views and opinions expressed on the Big 60 are personal and reflect those of the hosts and guests. They do not represent the views or positions of any affiliated organisations or companies. This podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for guidance on any personal matters.
Oh, and before we go, let's give credit where credit is due. Kaylee Harris and I came up with all the genius content for this week's episode. Our producer, Nick Abood, well, he keeps the lights on and makes sure we don't accidentally upload a cat video instead of a podcast. So thanks for keeping us on track, Nick. Nick?